Right, okay, so I've got 10 minutes to talk about the flipped classroom. Thanks ever so much for inviting us along. I won't spend too much with the thank yous then. I'm obviously familiar with quite a lot of the people that are organising this. Thanks ever so much for inviting me along. And I love the concept. I think it's really nice. My brain's full of the flipped classroom at the moment. I've just come back from Italy and I actually was at the FlipNet presentation there, lots of kind of high level discussions about where the flipped classroom is going to, etc. But I want to focus today on just maybe if you're interested in the idea of the flipped classroom, what you might do, why it's relevant. If we're talking about a definition, interactive group learning activities inside the class, direct computer-based individual instruction outside of the class, you see a lot this kind of definition. What we're really talking about with the flipped classroom is the idea that maybe we can get some of the teaching stuff that we do in the classroom, maybe we could shift that outside of the class. Maybe if I'm doing a grammar lesson, maybe if I'm doing an explanation about writing, perhaps doing an informative essay or writing an essay, writing perhaps a report, maybe instead of me teaching the students how to do that stuff in the class, could I shift some of that outside of the class and do it at home, therefore giving me more free time in the classroom to work on other types of activities. So essentially it's about the potential that technology gives us to maybe just move a little bit of the teaching stuff outside of the class, a bit more of it out, and in doing so freeing up more time in the class for sort of problem solving, pair work, task work, group work. So in a way it links really nicely with communicative language teaching, because it's very much about the idea that we're trying to maximize the amount of time that the students are on task. And that is one of the reasons why I became interested in the idea of the flipped classroom. And for me, it was very strange because, in fact, I'd done some experiments with the flipped classroom before I even realized what it was. And I was invited in 2009 to go to America. I met Aaron Sams and a few of the other people involved in the project. And I started to realize that this is really powerful and that it's got a role for us. I don't think it's simply another delivery mechanism, another form of teaching that we can think about. It's certainly not a methodology. What underpins the flipped classroom that I particularly like, and this is particularly relevant to sort of higher education, is that often the understanding and remembering stuff we do, that is the transfer of information to our students, particularly in higher education, we tend to do a lot of that in the class with the students. So we stand there and we do lectures and we present information to them. Now in ELT, of course, we don't just do that. We do get involved in group work and pair work activities. So we do go up to these higher level thinking skills, but particularly in higher education, we tend to spend a lot of time at this lower level stuff. And then at the outside of the class, the students are doing the applying, the analyzing, the evaluating, creating. So why can't we shift that around? And that's essentially what the flipped classroom's about. Let's get the students to do the basic stuff, the understanding and the remembering outside of the class. Let them watch videos, give them access to content so they can learn the basic principles and then in class apply it. So whether that's going home and learning about grammar, going home and learning about how you write a report or how you write a discursive essay or looking at pronunciation, doing that work at home and then hopefully in the classroom doing activities around it. So essentially, it's about the link as well between the two. What we do with the students at home, what material we give them at home, and then linking that to the types of activities we want to do in the class. This is not an easy thing to do. It's not something that you suddenly change and begin to do all the time. It might be just 1 or 2 classes. You might experiment with a couple of ideas, which is exactly what I did. I started doing a few lectures around writing essays, looking at things like subjects in a paragraph, looking at things like how you write a formative essay, making learning videos about those topics that the students accessed at home, so that in the class we started working with that. I got them in students to write, into groups, and that got them to write their own essays or do their own plans or compare essays. So I get them to actually start to kind of activate the knowledge, the basic level information that I'm providing for the students to access at home. Now, I want to make this point because the very first article I ever wrote about the flipped classroom, I said, has flipped classroom really got a place in language teaching? Because we already sort of flip our classes. We don't spend all our time in the classroom, standing at the front talking. But if you went into higher education and you went to universities that I've been working in, you will still see a lot of teaching that way. way. So I want to make the point that in ELT, we're already halfway, but we could perhaps go a little bit further. We could take a little bit more of the teaching outside of our lessons and get the students to access it at home. And that's the essential point. It's more applicable to higher education. There's no doubt about that. But I think it does have a role for us in ELT. Now, yesterday I was at a presentation. I saw some brilliant presentations, but one thing is that I think everybody makes the flipped classroom too complicated, and we need to start, if we're going to do it, think about it in simple terms. What are the basic tools that we could use to start to flip our classroom? And there are essentially two things. One, you need a central location so that when the students go home, they can find the content, they can find the videos, they can find the podcasts, they can find the articles that you want them to read. That needs to be all organized in a central location. So that is key. That could be Moodle, it could be Edmodo, it could be a wiki, but you need a central location where the students can access the content so that they can study at home. And then, of course, you need to put the content online for them to access. So you're going to need to be able to access videos, articles, blogs, podcasts, and screencasts, etc. So always think about it in two kind of ways. Firstly, where's your central repository? And secondly, what content are you going to give to the students to access at home? I'm focusing predominantly on what we do with the students at home. I realize, of course, there's the other side. What do we do with the students in the class? My feeling is that ELT teachers know a little bit more about this than often people that have got different backgrounds and different training. And I noticed this a lot yesterday at the conference I was in Italy. English language teachers are often much more versed in things like group work and pair work and the types of activities that they're going to get their students to do at home anyway. I'm concentrating on the bit in the class. There are two things about, concentrating on the bit at the home. There are two key things about the bit at the home. What materials are the students going to learn? And then we need to do some testing or checking. You can't just say to a student, go home and watch a video about writing a discursive essay. No, you need to get them to do something with that. We need to give them some activities, some quizzes, some activities just so that they learn and remember the basics. Obviously, when you bring them into the class the next day, you're going to get them to activate that knowledge. So we're talking about the lower order thinking skills, but it's not just about having video available. It's also about making sure that when we get them to watch the videos or read the articles or look at the podcast, we get them then to just check that they've understood the basic concepts. The idea is that they do that at home, they come into the class, and in the class then we start to activate the new knowledge that they've picked up. So there are two key things. Now, what about that content at home? Well, there are two things really. Either you find that content, so hopefully a lot of the time on YouTube or on Teachers Tube, or in fact there's some incredible video resources, articles, PDFs. We all know about all the material that's available to students that they can access at home. But sometimes you're going to want to make your material as well. That content that the students access at home is either going to be content that you produce for the students, or it's going to be content that you manage to find. It's going to be one of those two. So when we're talking about the repository, my recommendation to you would be, if you're a teacher on your own and you haven't got access to Moodle, Edmodo. Edmodo is a great tool because it does two things. One, and there are other tools as well, please, but my experience with using Edmodo has been very good. One, it allows you to put easy links to the content you want them to access. Two, it allows to build those learning activities to check understanding, quizzes, assignments, polls, etc. So that's one of the reasons why I like Edmodo as the repository, as the central location where the students access the content. So that's my first tip. Learn Edmodo. It's a great tool for blended learning, but it's also a fabulous tool if you are going to be working in a flipped classroom scenario. The other tool that I would recommend as the tool for making your content is Snagit. Now, there are plenty of other tools, and again, you don't have to take my recommendation. It could be Jing. I know Nelly, for example, was a big fan of Screencast-O-Matic. I've used that too, Screenr, so please, it's just my opinion, and plenty of other people would disagree with me, but the great tool for learning to create the content, for me, in my experience, just like Edmodo has been brilliant as a repository where the students access the content, Snagit is great if I want to make little videos, because it's really easy to do that. Snagit is a screencasting tool. So what I've done is I put two links there, and they're both link to free training videos that show you how to use Snagit and free training videos that show you how to use Edmodel, that would get you started. Those would be great tools to get you off and get you flipping your classes. And that is my presentation, and hopefully that made a little bit of sense.